My name is Nilsa Serrano. I am the president of the largest Latino Democratic Club in the county. Most residents near the port are people of color. And the port areas have more than their fair share of environmental pollution. What concrete steps have you taken or will you take to help communities affected by this type of pollution?
Okay. We are going to lead that question with Congressmember Bass.
Well, as a member of Congress, we have passed numerous bills to address the environment. And I think that environmental justice has to be at the core. And I know here in the port area, the air quality is bad. In LA, we are advancing goals toward clean energy, and I support those goals. But one of the things that I want to do is, again, pay attention to the workforce, not just in terms of people who would get jobs to improve our environment, but also small businesses. There's opportunities to participate in a lot of different ways, and we have to pay attention to that. The health conditions, especially asthma, and the impact that it has is absolutely critical. So we have to make sure that people have access to health care. We have to make sure that people have access to the information so that they understand if there is a problem that they need to address it. I think that this is one of the most critical issues in the area, not just in the port area, but in Los Angeles, period, and especially when you're talking about the lower income communities. So I appreciate the question and look forward to working with the people here. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressmember. Okay, we're going to go right to Councilmember Kevin De Leon.
Thank you very much. This is something that's near and dear to my heart, Nilsa, for the very fact that I grew up in a neighborhood that had no trees. I grew up in a neighborhood where we had only concrete and asphalt. We had no green grass that grew underneath our feet. I represent that has 9 major freeways: the 2, the 5, the 10, the 60, the 101, the 110, the 134, the 210, 710. 9 major freeways that crisscross the district like a serpent that chokes the air, the oxygen out of young girls' lungs. So the asthma rates in children who have asthma inhalers are quite predominant in my district. That's why this issue is so deeply, deeply personal to me. I wrote a note here that when we look at the economy here in Los Angeles, the Port of LA represents 30 to 40% of all emissions, greenhouse gases, CO2, as well as carbon dioxide equivalent, NOx, SOx, particulate matter, 2.5. That ozone that we breathe into our lungs every single day. The residents here in Pedro, the residents in Wilmington, as well as Harbor, have to burden that. So when goods move, whether through the ports of LA or Long Beach, and goes up to 710 freeway to points throughout the country, when you go to Target or elsewhere to buy a flat screen television set in Paducah, Kentucky or Bloomington, Indiana, it is your lungs that were seared by the ozone and by the NOx. And that's why I believe that we need to move forward aggressively, an agenda, a platform for clean air for all Angelenos, but especially those who live here in and around the ports. Listen, I'm the author of 100% renewable energy for the state of California. I put California on a pathway to 100% renewable energy, decarbonizing our grid, moving clean electrons on that grid. I want to do the same for all the ships, because the ships here today are burning the dirtiest fuels in the world. And we have to breathe it every single day because it's blowing onto our shore.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember.
That's it. All right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to go right to Councilmember Joe Buscaino. By the way, I know you're all passionate, so.
Sure, thank you. Well, Kevin, I agree with you. We got to clean the ships, but we're preempted by the federal government, and we have to understand what our role is here in the local government. And this is why I've been always calling for the federal government, the state government, to do their part on bringing in dollars to address the emissions from mobile sources. Listen, I was born and raised here. I have family members who have died of cancer. I have family members who suffer from asthma. In fact, my brother teammate today is dying as we speak from a rare cancer. I understand this issue, and this is why, even as a local elected official, I've been on the forefront of making sure that we do all we can to lower emissions. In 2016, we approved a Clean Air Action Plan, and as mayor, we're going to aggressively implement that plan. And as an AQMD board member, as chair of the technology committee, I advanced nearly $1 billion in green technologies. But we can't do this alone. Let's be real about this issue. The Port of Los Angeles has reduced emissions 85%, NOx and SOx. I have family here who are longshoremen. They can attest to and testify that over 10 years ago, but when they came back from working a shift down at the docks, they would come home filled with soot. That's not the case today. We've made our progress and successes. However, we're not done yet. But we can't do this with the flip of a switch. Because again, the bread and butter of the working family here in the port area are the dock workers. And we can do both. As mayor, I'm gonna do all I can to preserve and protect your longshore jobs. And that's a way forward to ensure that we have both an efficient port, a clean port moving forward.
Okay, thank you, council member. Okay, City Attorney Mike Feuer, you're next.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Nilsa, for your question. So I go back a long time on these issues here in San Pedro. When I was on the city council in the 1990s, I was the leader on focusing on petroleum coke, which was leaving dust and ashes on people's cars here, trying to make sure that that was no longer a threat. Now, as city attorney, I have an environmental justice unit, and I have led that unit to focus on issues like illegal dumping right here in this community, which scars our neighborhoods and pollutes our streets. Now, as to the port in particular, there are a number of steps we can and need to be taking. We need to be accelerating the pace of transforming the trucks that come in and out of the port to being clean trucks. We have a program, we should speed it up. I want to be sure that when the ships come in, that they do connect and are electrified as opposed to relying on diesel fuel, which spews incredibly toxic substances into our air. I want to be sure that as mayor, we focus on getting some of these ships to be using cleaner fuel, because the fuel they use can be transformed. It's more expensive now than it should be, but it's going to be coming down. If demand were to increase, we can be a source of that demand for cleaner fuel. We can take all these steps while at the same time assuring that the port remains that economic engine that we're talking about. But I'm really concerned about environmental justice issues and the disparity between the air that people breathe here and when they might breathe on the west side of Los Angeles, for example. It's not right. I'm very concerned about those issues I mentioned earlier about dumping on the streets that affect people's health and safety right here in San Pedro. I'm very concerned about that layer of dust that arises, that ends up on people's cars and their front lawns, because people are breathing that. So as mayor, because I have a depth of understanding of each of these issues, I'm going to be sure that my appointees' priorities reflect tackling these issues. And you can be sure that as mayor, I'm going to take every step within my executive authority as mayor to be sure that this community doesn't bear the brunt of environmental injustice, even as it fuels our economic action throughout the city. Thanks, Nilsa, very much.
Thank you so much.